Before we begin this incredible story, please hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss our emotional stories. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's dive into a tale that will give you goosebumps. Emma Rodriguez sat alone at her usual lunch table in the corner of the cafeteria, trying to make herself invisible. It was her first week at Lincoln High School, and things weren't going well. She wore her father's old camouflage jacket over a simple black shirt and jeans. The jacket was too big for her small frame. The sleeves rolled up several times, but she wore it every single day. It was the only thing that made her feel close to him. The popular kids sat 3 tables away, their laughter echoing through the cafeteria. Madison Parker, the cheerleading captain with perfect blonde hair and designer clothes, kept glancing in Emma's direction and whispering to her friends. Emma tried to ignore them, focusing on the sandwich her grandmother had packed that morning. But ignoring them became impossible when Madison's voice cut through the noise. "Look at the army girl," Madison said loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Does she think she's going to war or something? This is high school, not a military base." Her friends erupted in giggles, and Emma felt her face burn with embarrassment. She gripped her father's jacket tighter, her knuckles turning white. Tyler Chen, the star quarterback, joined in. "Maybe she's lost. Someone should tell her the recruitment office is downtown, not here." More laughter followed. Emma wanted to stand up and tell them why she wore the jacket, wanted to explain that it belonged to her father who was serving overseas, wanted to make them understand. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she gathered her things and left the cafeteria, their mocking voices following her down the hallway. This wasn't the first time Emma had dealt with bullies. At her old school across the country, kids had teased her about other things: her grandmother's old car, her thrift store clothes, the fact that she lived with her grandmother instead of her parents. But this felt different. They were mocking the one thing that mattered most to her. They were mocking her father's service, even if they didn't know it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma moved from class to class, keeping her head down, speaking only when teachers called on her. In history class, Mr. Patterson talked about military service and sacrifice, and Emma noticed Madison rolling her eyes. In gym class, when teams were picked, Emma was chosen last, standing awkwardly until the teacher assigned her to a team. At her locker between classes, she overheard 2 girls talking about that weird military wannabe. By the time the final bell rang, Emma was exhausted. Not from schoolwork, but from the constant effort of pretending the mockery didn't hurt. She walked to the football field where her grandmother would pick her up. The team was practicing, and a crowd of students had gathered in the bleachers to watch. Emma found a quiet spot away from everyone and pulled out her phone. She had one new message from her father, sent from halfway around the world. It simply said he loved her and was proud of her. Emma felt tears threatening to spill, but she blinked them back. She didn't notice Madison and her friends approaching until they were right in front of her. Madison stood with her arms crossed, her friends flanking her like bodyguards. "So, army girl," she said with fake sweetness in her voice, "we're just curious. Are you actually in the military, or do you just like playing dress-up?" Her friends snickered, and Emma felt her stomach twist into knots. Emma looked down at her father's jacket and ran her fingers over the name tape that read Rodriguez. She thought about explaining, about telling them her father was a helicopter pilot deployed overseas, about sharing how this jacket was the only thing that helped her sleep at night when she missed him. But looking at Madison's mocking smile and her friends' entertained faces, Emma knew they wouldn't care. They would probably just laugh harder. "It's just a jacket," Emma said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She tried to move past them, but Madison stepped to the side, blocking her path. Other students were starting to notice the confrontation, phones coming out to record what looked like potential drama. "Just a jacket?" Madison laughed. "Sweetie, this is Lincoln High. We have standards. That ratty old thing looks like you pulled it from a dumpster. Don't you have anything normal to wear?" Tyler had joined them now, along with several other football players fresh from practice. They formed a semicircle around Emma, not threatening exactly, but definitely intimidating. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her backpack straps. She had dealt with bullies before, but never with an audience this large. Students were gathering around, some filming with their phones, others just watching with curious expressions. The football practice had stopped, and even some of the players on the field were looking their way. "Leave me alone," Emma said, finding a bit more strength in her voice. She tried again to walk away, but Madison grabbed the sleeve of her jacket. It was a light touch, nothing violent, but it felt like a violation. This jacket was sacred to Emma. It smelled like her father's cologne. It had his unit patch sewn on the shoulder. It had kept him safe through 2 deployments. "Let go," Emma said, her voice shaking with emotion. Madison just smiled wider, clearly enjoying the attention from the growing crowd. She tugged playfully at the jacket's sleeve, and that's when something inside Emma snapped. She pulled her arm back sharply, and the sudden movement caused Madison to stumble. It wasn't a push, not really, but Madison made it look dramatic, falling backward into Tyler's arms as if Emma had shoved her hard. "Did you see that?" Madison exclaimed, her voice full of fake shock. "She attacked me." Everyone saw it. The crowd murmured, phones still recording every moment. Emma's heart raced. She hadn't attacked anyone. She had just pulled away. But she could see how it might look on those videos. How easily the story could be twisted. Before Emma could defend herself, a teacher's voice cut through the crowd. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Chen, the vice principal, pushed through the gathered students. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked from Madison to Emma and back again, clearly trying to assess the situation. Madison immediately turned on the waterworks. "She pushed me, Mrs. Chen. I was just trying to be friendly, asking about her jacket, and she totally attacked me." Her friends nodded vigorously, backing up her story. Tyler added that he had seen the whole thing, that Emma had been aggressive and violent. Emma stood frozen, unable to speak. How could she explain what had really happened when everyone seemed ready to believe Madison's version? Mrs. Chen looked at Emma expectantly, waiting for her side of the story. But Emma just shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She turned and ran, pushing through the crowd, ignoring Mrs. Chen's calls to come back. Emma ran until she reached the far end of the football field, away from the crowd and the phones and the mocking faces. She collapsed on the grass near the equipment shed, her whole body shaking with sobs. This was supposed to be a fresh start. Her grandmother had moved them across the country to this small town specifically so Emma could have a better life. While her father was deployed, instead, it felt like everything was falling apart. She pulled out her phone and stared at her father's message. She wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to tell him everything. But she knew she couldn't. He was in a dangerous place, doing dangerous work. The last thing he needed was to worry about her problems at school. He had enough to deal with keeping himself and his crew safe. Emma had promised him before he left that she would be strong, that she would take care of her grandmother and do well in school. She couldn't let him down. After several minutes, Emma heard footsteps approaching. She quickly wiped her eyes, expecting Mrs. Chen or another teacher. Instead, she found herself looking at an older student she had seen around school, but never talked to. His name was Marcus, a senior who mostly kept to himself. He had dark skin, kind eyes, and a quiet confidence about him. "You okay?" Marcus asked, sitting down on the grass a respectful distance away. He didn't wait for an answer before continuing. "I saw what happened. Madison's a piece of work. She's been making people miserable since freshman year." Emma didn't respond, just pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the ground. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said something that made Emma look up. "My brother wore a jacket like that. Army deployed to Afghanistan 3 years ago." Emma noticed the past tense and saw the sadness in Marcus's eyes. She didn't need him to explain further. She understood. He was proud of his service, Marcus continued, and I'm proud of him. Anyone who makes fun of that jacket doesn't understand sacrifice. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, Emma felt like someone actually saw her. Not the quiet new girl in the weird jacket, but a person with a story and feelings that mattered. "It's my dad's," she said softly. "He's deployed right now. Flying helicopters overseas? I wear it because it makes me feel like he's not so far away," Marcus nodded. "That makes sense. My brother's jacket is in my closet. I can't bring myself to wear it yet, but someday I will." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sun start to set over the football field. The crowd had dispersed, practice had resumed, and the drama seemed to be over. But Emma knew this wasn't finished. There would be consequences for what Madison claimed happened. "You should probably go talk to Mrs. Chen," Marcus said eventually. "Tell her your side. Madison lies, but she's popular, so people believe her. You need to make sure the truth gets out there." Emma knew he was right, but the thought of facing the vice principal, of having to explain everything, felt overwhelming. Before she could respond, the sound of a helicopter echoed across the sky. Both Emma and Marcus looked up, which wasn't unusual. The town was near a military training route, and helicopters passed over occasionally. But this helicopter wasn't passing over. It was circling lower, coming directly toward the school. The sound grew louder, the distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting through the air. The helicopter was a Black Hawk, military green with official markings. Emma's heart began to race, but not with fear, with recognition. She knew helicopters because of her father. He had taught her to identify them by sound and sight. This was the type he flew. But why would a Black Hawk be coming to her school? The helicopter descended toward the football field, and suddenly practice stopped again. Students and teachers poured out of the school building. Everyone was staring at the sky, phones out again. But this time to capture something far more extraordinary than high school drama. The Black Hawk came lower and lower, and the pilot clearly intended to land right on the 50-yard line. The Black Hawk touched down on the football field with precision, its rotors creating a windstorm that sent papers and leaves swirling through the air. Students backed away from the powerful downdraft, shielding their eyes. Emma stood frozen in place, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the helicopter's roar. Marcus stood beside her, his eyes wide with surprise. The rotors began to slow, and the side door of the helicopter slid open. A figure in a flight suit stepped out, removing their helmet. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Even from a distance, even though it seemed impossible, she recognized that walk, that build, that way of moving. Her father, Chief Warrant Officer Miguel Rodriguez, had somehow come home and landed a military helicopter on her high school football field. Emma started running before her. Brain could catch up with her legs. She sprinted across the grass, her backpack falling somewhere behind her, her father's jacket flapping around her as she ran. "Dad!" she screamed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Dad." Other students moved out of her way. Confused looks on their faces as they watched the quiet girl in the camo jacket transform into a sobbing, sprinting blur. Miguel turned at the sound of her voice, and his stern military expression melted into pure joy. He opened his arms just in time to catch Emma as she crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him so tight she thought she might never let go. "Mia?" he whispered into her hair, using his nickname for her. "Mi piquiga guerrera," my little warrior. Emma couldn't speak through her tears. She just held on, breathing in the familiar smell of him, feeling the solid reality of his presence. He was home. He was actually home. After 6 months of deployment, of video calls with terrible connections, of lying awake worried about him, he was here, holding her, real and safe and home. The entire school had gathered around now, forming a wide circle around the helicopter and the reunited father and daughter. Teachers stood with students. The football team had left the field to join the crowd. Madison and her friends were there too, their earlier mockery forgotten in the face of this extraordinary moment. Mrs. Chen stood with her hand over her heart, tears in her eyes. Miguel finally pulled back enough to look at his daughter's face. He wiped her tears with his thumbs, his own eyes wet. "Surprise," he said with a slight smile. "They granted me emergency leave. I pulled some strings to make the arrival memorable." Emma laughed through her tears, which turned into another sob, which turned into more laughter. She couldn't believe this was real. "You flew a Black Hawk to my school," she said, her voice full of disbelief and joy. Miguel grinned, the same grin she had inherited from him. "Well, I had to pick you up from school somehow. Your grandmother said you needed a ride." He winked, and Emma realized her grandmother must have known about this. That's why she hadn't been worried when Emma said she'd find her own way home. Behind Miguel, 2 other crew members had exited the helicopter. They stood at attention, smiling at the reunion. One of them, a younger pilot, gave Emma a small wave. Miguel noticed her looking and turned to introduce them. "Emma, this is my crew. We've been flying together for 4 months. I've told them all about you." The crew members nodded respectfully, and Emma managed a small wave back. Suddenly aware that hundreds of students were watching this intimate family moment, Principal Davis pushed through the crowd, looking both annoyed and impressed. "Mr. Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand, "while I appreciate your service to our country, you can't just land a military helicopter on school property without permission." His tone was stern, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. Miguel shook the principal's hand firmly. "Sir, I apologize for the disruption. I contacted the school district office and the local authorities. All proper clearances were obtained. I have the documentation in the helicopter. This is an approved landing as part of a community outreach program." He spoke with the calm authority of someone used to command, and Principal Davis seemed to deflate slightly, while the principal said, "I suppose if it's all official. But next time, perhaps a heads-up directly to the school would be appreciated." Miguel kept one arm around Emma as he addressed the crowd of students and teachers. His voice carried the authority of someone used to speaking over helicopter engines and giving commands in high-pressure situations. "I want to thank Principal Davis and the staff for allowing this visit. I also want to take a moment to talk to you all about something important." The crowd fell silent. Even the students who had been whispering, pulled out their phones to record, fell quiet. Miguel's presence commanded respect in a way that was effortless and genuine. "My daughter has been wearing my old flight jacket," he said, and Emma felt her face flush as hundreds of eyes turned to look at the camo jacket she wore. "Some of you might think it's strange or outdated or not fashionable, but this jacket represents something." He paused, and Emma could see him choosing his words carefully. "This jacket has kept me warm on cold nights overseas. It's been with me through difficult missions and long days. When I gave it to Emma before this deployment, I told her it would keep her safe while I was gone, the way it had kept me safe. For her, wearing it isn't about fashion. It's about connection. It's about love. It's about being part of a military family and carrying that pride with her every day." Emma watched the crowd as her father spoke. She saw understanding dawn on some faces. She saw shame on others, particularly on Madison's face, which had gone pale. Tyler was staring at the ground, his earlier mockery clearly weighing on him. Marcus, still standing near where Emma had dropped her backpack, was smiling with approval. "Military families sacrifice a lot," Miguel continued. "Kids like Emma grow up without their parents for months or years at a time. They move from place to place, always the new kid, always having to start over. They miss birthdays and holidays and school events because we're serving overseas. The least we can do as a community is show them respect and kindness, not mockery and bullying." Mrs. Chen stepped forward then, her expression serious. "Mr. Rodriguez, has Emma been experiencing bullying at our school?" Her question was direct, and Emma felt panic rise in her chest. She didn't want to be a snitch. She didn't want to make things worse. But her father's hand squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Emma hasn't complained," Miguel said carefully. "But a father knows when his daughter is struggling. I've heard it in her voice during our calls. I've seen it in her messages. And today, when I called to tell her I was coming home, her grandmother mentioned there had been some difficulties at school." Emma glanced at the crowd and saw Madison take a step backward. As if trying to disappear into the group of students, Principal Davis looked troubled. "We take bullying very seriously at Lincoln High. Emma, is there something you need to tell us?" All eyes turned to Emma again. She stood there in her father's embrace, torn between wanting to protect herself and not wanting to cause more drama. She thought about the laughter in the cafeteria, the mocking voices, Madison's hand on her jacket sleeve. Before Emma could decide what to say, a voice spoke up from the crowd. "I saw what happened earlier. It was Marcus, holding up his phone. I recorded the whole thing by the bleachers. Madison and her friends were harassing Emma about her jacket. Emma didn't push anyone. She just pulled away when Madison grabbed her." Other students murmured in agreement, some nodding, a few holding up their own phones. A girl Emma didn't know spoke next. Madison's been mean to Emma all week. I heard her making fun of the jacket in English class. A lot of us heard it. More students nodded. It seemed like the dramatic helicopter landing had given people courage to speak up. To tell the truth, they'd been too afraid or too apathetic to share before. Madison's face was now bright red. I wasn't being mean, she protested weakly. I was just joking around. I didn't know her dad was actually in the military. I thought she was just trying to be different or get attention. Her voice trailed off as she realized how terrible her excuse sounded. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Miguel's expression hardened. Young lady, even if my daughter wasn't connected to the military, even if this was just a jacket she liked wearing, what gives you the right to mock someone's choices? What makes your clothing better than hers? What makes your idea of normal the only acceptable option? Madison had no answer. She stared at her expensive sneakers, arms wrapped around herself defensively. Principal Davis addressed Madison and Tyler directly. My office. Both of you. First thing Monday morning. We'll be reviewing the videos and having a serious conversation about respect and consequences. He then turned to the wider crowd. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Every student at this school has a story. Every person you meet is carrying something you know nothing about. Choose kindness. Choose respect. Choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The crowd was silent, absorbing the principal's words. Emma felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time since starting at Lincoln High, she felt like maybe things could be okay. She had her father beside her, the truth had come out, and her classmates were seeing her as a real person instead of just the weird new girl. Miguel looked down at Emma with pride in his eyes. I'm sorry I can't stay long, Mia. I have to fly this bird back to base today, and then I have 3 weeks of leave before I have to return to my unit. But I wanted to come here first. I wanted to see you and remind you that you're never alone. When you wear that jacket, you carry my love with you. And more than that, you carry your own strength. Emma hugged him again, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her. Knowing she'd have to let him go in just a few minutes, one of the crew members approached and quietly told Miguel they needed to start pre-flight checks. The sun was getting lower and they had a schedule to keep. Miguel nodded and turned back to the crowd one final time. Thank you all for your time and attention. I hope my daughter finds friendship and acceptance here. She's one of the bravest people I know, and I'm honored to be her father. He saluted the crowd. A crisp military salute that several students tried to awkwardly return as Miguel prepared to board the helicopter. Something unexpected happened. Marcus pushed through the crowd and approached, standing at attention. Sir, my brother was Sergeant James Wilson, Army Infantry. He was killed in action 2 years ago in Afghanistan. I wanted to thank you for your service and for what you said today. It matters. Miguel's expression softened. He gripped Marcus's shoulder firmly, to people connected by sacrifice and loss. No words needed beyond what had already been said, Emma walked with her father to the helicopter. Not ready to say goodbye, but knowing she had to. 3 weeks, Miguel reminded her. I'll be home for 3 weeks. We'll do everything you want. Movies, restaurants, hiking, whatever makes you happy. Emma nodded, blinking back new tears. I love you, Dad. Stay safe. Miguel kissed her forehead. I love you too, Guerrera. Be strong. You've got this. He climbed into the helicopter, put his helmet back on, gave her one final wave through the window. The rotors started spinning faster, the engine building to full power. Emma backed away to a safe distance, her hand pressed against her chest where her father's unit patch sat on the jacket. The Black Hawk lifted off smoothly, rising above the football field as hundreds of students watched in awe. It hovered for a moment, and Emma could see her father looking down at her. Then it banked to the side and flew off toward the setting sun, the sound of its engines gradually fading into the distance. The silence that followed was profound. Then slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Students talked in hushed, respectful tones. Teachers ushered everyone back toward the school building. But many students stopped by Emma first, offering words of apology or support. Some shook her hand. Others just nodded with newfound respect. The girl who had spoken up earlier, introduced herself as Sophie, and asked if Emma wanted to sit with her at lunch on Monday. Emma agreed, feeling hopeful for the first time. Marcus brought her backpack over, the one she'd dropped in her sprint across the field. "Your dad's pretty amazing," he said. Emma smiled through her remaining tears. "Yeah, he is." They walked together back toward the parking lot where Emma's grandmother was waiting, leaning against her old car with a knowing smile. She had watched everything from a distance, letting Emma have her moment with her father. On Monday morning, Emma walked into Lincoln High, wearing her father's jacket with her head held high. Madison and Tyler were notably absent from their usual spots, presumably in the principal's office facing consequences. But Emma wasn't focused on them. She was focused on Sophie, waving to her from across the hallway, on Marcus giving her a friendly nod as he passed, on the teacher who smiled and thanked her for her family's service. The quiet new girl in the camo jacket wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, she was respected, and most importantly, she was no longer alone. Her father's surprise visit hadn't just reunited them temporarily, it had changed everything, reminding an entire school that everyone has a story worth hearing. And kindness costs nothing, but means everything.